Hi, I'm Susan Kozak. I'm the Division Director for Soil Conservation and Water Quality with the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. We're out today at a Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, or CREP wetland. You can see the construction in the background here. The footprint for the wetland will actually be 16 acres, and it is in the far distance just starting to be built. Right here behind me, they're diverting some of the creek water so that they have a drier environment to do the construction in. The main purpose that we're building wetlands are for the nutrient reduction part of the wetland. We are building many different types of wetlands now, and a lot of times we talk about CREP wetlands specifically, but that's a funding source, a certain program, and it's limited by geography too, to north central Iowa. So one of the things that we're trying to get away from is just talking specifically about CREP wetlands and just talking about wetlands in general. So now that we're just talking about wetlands in general, rather than focusing on specific acronyms and program types, funding sources, we could have a landowner that wants to put a wetland on their property, and they go into their local field office and we'll look at the property and see where does it fit in the landscape. We're working on different types of wetlands now. The CREP wetlands specifically are typically at the end of a tile line or at the end of a watershed, where we can capture that water, put it into a wetland and denitrify before it goes out to a larger stream or creek and moves on down the system. But now we're working on some wetlands where we might interrupt the water in the middle of a tile main or tile line and intercept that water, create a smaller footprint wetland, and then the water out of that wetland would go back into a tile line. So it's not necessarily the end of the system, but more in the middle of the system. And in some locations across Iowa, that makes more sense than to have to fit them all at the end of a watershed. We're also starting to look at some floodplain wetlands, where maybe in the landscape it's more of a lower area, a floodplain area, and it makes sense just to manipulate the landscape just a little bit to create a wetland, some detention time, and then it does have that time to denitrify the water and then send it on downstream. So we want to look at the landscape, what the needs are of that landowner, and make sure that we're picking the right one, because now we have many different funding sources to choose from, and we don't have to get all hung up on what the name of the wetland is or the type. The landowners don't really care about that. We just want to see conservation on the ground. So through our water quality initiative, our main focus is that denitrifying or the nutrient removal for the wetlands. But my favorite part of these wetlands is the layers of other benefits that we can add. Habitat being one of those benefits. This one in particular is going to have 5 acres of easement around it, where they will have pine trees and other shrubs that will help with that nature and habitat for birds and other pollinators. One of my passions is pollinator and monarch habitat specifically, so adding in milkweed into the seed mixes to make sure that we're attracting monarch butterflies that fly through here each year and are on the decline. So we want to be able to layer the different types of habitat, water quality benefits, flood control, all the different things that these wetlands can be great for, but we get multiple benefits out of one practice. So it's interesting to watch how these wetlands have evolved over time too. When we first started building these 10, 15 years ago, we were probably a little more focused on grasses and other things in that easement boundary around the water pool, and some wetland plants definitely, because you need that for the nitrogen uptake, but we maybe weren't thinking about the habitat benefits as much. But now, as we've been talking pollinators the last few, monarch butterflies a lot, we've added a broader diversity of the seed mix that we plant around these in the easement buffer area around the wetlands, besides just what is planted in the wetland for the benefits. So for our wetland programs, we have been paying attention to different research projects that go on at the wetlands. I know I've seen some trumpeter swan data where the swans come back each year and breed and move around in the wetland areas. I think that's fascinating to see. We've also heard about some research on frogs and different insect counts. So we always are working with partners to see what the research is that's going on out there, and that helps us add to our story, talk about why these wetlands are so important on the landscape, not just for the water quality, which is our main focus in Division of Soil Conservation, but for the other benefits that these are creating. I think one thing it's important for landowners to think about as they are considering putting a wetland on their property and maybe going into that local field office to talk to them about where it would fit in their landscape is expectations on how long these projects take. Typically from the first time we talk to a landowner until construction is complete, it can take 12 to 24 months, usually closer to that 2-year time frame. We have to go through lengthy permitting processes, engineering and design, and then construction, and making sure that we have enough contractors out across Iowa to build these properly, that they know what they're doing on the construction sites. And so tempering expectations that they don't happen overnight, but they are wonderful and long-term practices to have on your landscape is an important thing to think about. So as we talk about the nutrient reduction strategy in Iowa, we are trying to increase the pace that we're putting these wetlands out on the ground. In the strategy that was developed several years ago, they have different scenarios of how many wetlands should be out across Iowa to meet some of our nutrient goals. And it's thousands of these wetlands, depending on which scenario you look at. So our goal, our mission in IDALS is to use every little bit of allocation that we get from the state to put conservation practices on the ground, whether that's cover crops, bioreactors, saturated buffers, or wetlands like this. We have a lot that we want to do across the state, and we need landowners to join in and want to put these on their properties. We often hear from landowners that this is one of the best kept secrets in Iowa, is having one of these wetlands or other edge of field practices on their property. They're just wonderful for the habitat and other added benefits that are unexpected past the water quality goals that we're working on. So I encourage you to go to your local field office, talk to them about where this might fit in your property, in your conservation goals, and what you're trying to do with your farm, and then start working with them to get one put in place and constructed on your property. I know you'll enjoy it. And these wetlands are one of the best ways that you can do your part as an Iowan for water quality initiative and our goals that we need to be meeting.
Hello, I'm Heath Stoley, one of the landowners here on this CREP site. I'm also the habitat chair for our local Wetlands Forever chapter. And that's how I got started in looking at CREP, passionate about wildlife and looking at programs that would fit here on the farm for wildlife. CREP came to my attention. Not only does it have the benefit of the water quality to meet our water quality initiatives in the state, but it also beautifies the landscape and adds a lot of diversity. Worked with the CREP people. They're super great to work with. They'll listen to your needs, what you want. Was able to get some of the rules changed for the CREP and the buffer seeding area to add some of the bushes and evergreen for the winter cover for wildlife, along with food plots, and that will be on all previous and future CREP sites as I understand it. It's just a great program. They're super easy to work with. It does take a long time. I think we're pushing 3 years to get this CREP site done from the date first contacted, talked to them about it, but the wait is well worth it. I can't wait till it's done. Wildlife is already loving it and they're just building it now. So I encourage you to get in your FSA office, talk to them, talk to your NRCS people, see what we can do. We need to put some more wetlands on the landscape.